The clipboard they gave me on my first night had a coffee ring on the front and a bullet hole through pages 6, 7, and 8. I didn't notice the hole until my second week. I thought it was a punch from a 3-ring binder. It wasn't. The entry wound was too clean, too deliberate, and when I held the pages up to the fluorescent light, I could see the path it carved went straight through the section labeled Aisle 14. Supplemental Protocol. Like someone had tried to destroy it and barely missed. I want to tell you about that warehouse. I want to tell you what happens on the overnight inventory shift at Colburn Regional Distribution Center, 12 miles southeast of Zanesville, Ohio, in a building that used to process ceramics during the Second World War. I want to tell you about the rules, and the people who follow them, and the one rule I broke, and what I found in the space where aisle 14 ends and something else begins. But I need you to understand something about me first, because this isn't a story about a brave person descending into darkness. I'm not brave. I went to that warehouse because I owed $11,000 in medical debt from a surgery I had at 23. And because the only other option was a gas station in Cambridge that paid $9.50 an hour and required me to stand for the full shift on a knee that was still held together with hardware from that same surgery. The warehouse paid $17.80 an hour with a $2 overnight differential. I took it the same day I saw the listing. No interview. They didn't even call my references. I should have thought about what kind of job doesn't need to know who you are before they let you inside. My name is Danielle Harker. I'm 26, and I grew up in a town called Byesville, which is the kind of place where the Family Dollar is the social hub and the high school football field has better lighting than the hospital parking lot. My mom works the line at the Kraft Heinz plant in New Philadelphia. My dad left when I was 9 and moved to Myrtle Beach with a woman he met at a truck stop Denny's. I have a 2-year degree in health information technology from Zane State that I finished online during COVID, and that has been worth exactly 0 job offers in my field. I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand the specific weight of being 26 in southeastern Ohio in 2026 with no money and no options and a body that already feels like it's breaking down. I need you to feel it the way I felt it when I pulled into that parking lot at 10:45 on a Sunday night in February, with my headlights cutting across a building that looked like it had been crouching there since before anyone alive could remember. Colburn Regional is massive, not Amazon massive, not that clean, bright, algorithmic kind of big. This is old massive. The original structure is poured concrete and corrugated steel from 1942. It's been expanded 3 times, each edition built in a slightly different decade style and material, so the whole thing looks like a creature that grew in stages. The oldest section is on the north end. That's where the kilns used to be. You can still see the vents in the ceiling if you look up. Huge circular openings sealed with steel plates that have rusted into something that looks organic, like scabs. The company that owns it now is called Braddock Logistics, and they handle regional distribution for hardware stores, farm supply chains, and some overflow contracts with the state of Ohio for emergency road equipment, salt, cones, traffic barriers, the kind of inventory nobody thinks about until they need it. I parked next to a pickup with a cracked windshield and a bumper sticker that said Ohio, the heart of it all, and the last 3 words had been covered with duct tape so it just read, Ohio, the heart. There were 4 other vehicles in the lot. It was February 9th. The sky was that dead, low, gunmetal overcast that Ohio does better than anywhere else on Earth. No stars, no moon, just a ceiling of cloud so uniform it looked painted. The temperature was 19 degrees. I could hear the building humming from 50 feet away. Inside, the overnight team was 4 people, including me. That's the first thing that should have been wrong, and I didn't even register it. A building that size. Over 300,000 square feet of active inventory. Staffed by 4 people on the overnight. Even back then, some part of my brain was doing the math and getting an answer that didn't make sense. But I was focused on not limping in front of my new coworkers. I was focused on seeming capable. Marcus Washington was the shift lead. 41, stocky, shaved head, reading glasses he kept on a chain around his neck like a librarian. He'd been at Colburn for 6 years. He shook my hand and didn't smile, but his eyes were kind. He looked tired in a way that went past the physical. Terry Goss was 53, thin, precise, with the energy of someone who had taught elementary school for 30 years and could silence a room with a look. She had, in fact, taught elementary school for 22 years before budget cuts at East Muskingum eliminated her position. She worked overnight inventory now and didn't talk about the teaching unless you asked. And there was Kyle Dunn, who was 19, had a neck tattoo of a copperhead snake, and was, as far as I could tell in those first few minutes, completely unafraid of anything. He was playing music from his phone, some trap beat I didn't recognize, and eating Takis from the bag with his scanning hand, leaving hot red dust on the barcode reader. Terry looked at him the way you look at weather you can't control. Marcus handed me the clipboard. He said, "Read everything tonight. All of it. Don't skim. Don't assume you know what something means because it sounds like common sense. Some of it isn't common sense. Some of it is the opposite of common sense. And that's the stuff that matters the most." I said, "Okay." He said, "You're covering aisles 1 through 6 tonight. Terry has 7 through 13. Kyle has 15 through 22. I'm on 23 through 30 in verification." I looked at the clipboard. Even then, before I'd read a word of the protocol, the gap was obvious. "What about 14? I said. Marcus took off his glasses, cleaned them on his shirt, and put them back on. It was a gesture that took about 4 seconds and felt like it lasted a year. "Nobody has 14 tonight," he said. "Read the clipboard." The first 5 pages of the inventory protocol were normal. Scan procedures, bin location codes, equipment checkout, incident reporting, standard warehouse stuff, written in that flat corporate voice that treats you like you might be both illiterate and litigious. Page 6 was where the coffee ring was, and where the bullet hole started. The section was titled, Supplemental Safety Procedure, Aisle 14, All Overnight Personnel. And below that, in smaller type, this procedure is maintained independently from Braddock Logistics corporate policy. It is not subject to external audit. Compliance is a condition of continued overnight employment. Questions regarding the origin or rationale of this procedure should be directed to the current shift lead and will be answered at their discretion. Then the rules. I'm going to give them to you the way I read them that first night. Standing under the buzzing fluorescence in the break room with a vending machine coffee going cold in my other hand. I remember every one. You don't forget things like this. Your brain files them differently. Not as information, but as warnings, the way you remember the smell of something burning. 1. Aisle 14 is not included in the nightly scan rotation. Do not enter aisle 14 for any inventory-related purpose. If the nightly manifest lists items located in aisle 14 bins, flag the line item with a yellow tag and leave it for the day shift. Do not attempt to verify, count, or retrieve these items yourself. 2. The overhead lights in aisle 14 operate on a separate circuit from the rest of the warehouse. They will turn off at 12:40 a.m. and will turn back on at 4:50 a.m. The timing is consistent within a margin of plus or minus 90 seconds. Do not attempt to restore the lights manually. The breaker panel for aisle 14 circuit is located in electrical room B, which is locked between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. If you have obtained access to electrical room B during these hours, leave the room immediately and report to the shift lead. 3. Between 12:40 a.m. and 4:50 a.m., aisle 14 may produce sounds. These sounds have been described by previous employees as stacking, dragging, a low repeated tone, conversational speech, indistinct, and mechanical rhythms similar to a conveyor belt. There is no active conveyor system in aisle 14. Do not investigate the source of these sounds. Continue your assigned work in your assigned aisles. 4. If, during the period described in Rule 2, you observe a light source originating from within aisle 14, including but not limited to flashlight beams, phone screens, equipment indicator lights, or any luminescence not consistent with ambient warehouse lighting, do not approach. Note the time. Report it to the shift lead at the next scheduled check-in. Do not attempt to identify the source or the person holding it. 5. The floor in aisle 14 contains a drainage channel that runs the full length of the aisle, beneath the central walkway grating. During overnight hours, this channel may contain liquid. The liquid is not water. Do not touch, sample, or attempt to identify it. If the liquid is visible from the adjacent aisles, aisle 13 or aisle 15, alert the shift lead. This indicates a volume event and may require a temporary perimeter adjustment. 6. Former personnel have occasionally reported the visual impression of a person standing at the far end of aisle 14, typically near the north wall where the original kiln vents are located. If you see this, avert your gaze and walk. Do not run to the nearest occupied aisle. Confirm another team member's physical presence by voice before resuming work. Do not describe what you saw to the other team member. Simply confirm they are real and continue. 7. At 3:15 a.m., the shift lead will approach the entrance to aisle 14 and place a printed manifest page on the floor just inside the aisle line. This page is pre-prepared and does not require input from overnight staff. Do not read the contents of this manifest. Do not observe the shift lead during this process. Continue working in your assigned area. The shift lead will confirm completion with a single knock on the nearest steel support column. 8. If, at any point during the overnight shift, you feel a strong and specific urge to enter aisle 14, sit down where you are. Place both hands flat on the floor. Count to 60 out loud. If the urge passes, resume work. If it does not, radio the shift lead and request an escort to the break room. You will not be penalized. This has happened to others. It is not a personal failing. 9. In the event that a team member enters aisle 14 between 12:40 a.m. and 4:50 a.m. against protocol, do not follow them. Mark the time. Radio the shift lead. Do not call out to the team member. Do not shine a light into the aisle. Proceed to the break room and wait for instruction. The shift lead will handle recovery. 10. There is no Rule 10. If you believe you have read or been told a 10th rule regarding aisle 14, disregard it. Report the interaction to the shift lead. Do not follow the instruction. There are only 9 rules. I read them twice. The second time my coffee was cold and my hands weren't steady. Not because I believed them. Not yet. Because the language was so careful, so procedural. There was no drama in it, no campfire story energy. It read like an OSHA addendum written by someone who had witnessed something specific and repeatable and was trying to keep people alive without explaining why. That scared me more than any ghost story. Ghost stories want you to be afraid. This document wanted you to be compliant. Fear was secondary. Behavior was everything. I found Marcus in aisle 24 scanning pallets of road salt. The overhead lights hummed a different pitch up here. Deeper, older. The north end of the building felt 10 degrees colder than the south. I read it, I said. He didn't look up from his scanner. Good. Is this real? Now he looked up. He took off his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. That gesture again, his personal metronome. You're asking the wrong question, he said. The right question is, does following the rules keep people safe? And the answer is yes, it does. as long as everyone follows them. What happens if someone doesn't? We've had turnover, he said, and went back to scanning. My first week was uneventful. I learned the scan system, memorized my aisle assignments, figured out that the women's bathroom on the south end had the only working hand dryer, and the one on the north end had a lock that stuck. I learned that Terry brought homemade sausage rolls on Thursdays, and that refusing one was not an option. I learned that Kyle, despite looking like he'd fight a parking meter, was actually funny in a nervous, rapid-fire way that reminded me of boys I'd grown up with. Kids who masked fear with volume. I learned that Marcus had a daughter in 4th grade and an ex-wife in Columbus, and that he drove 45 minutes each way to work here, and I never once heard him complain about it. I also learned the geography of the building. This matters. The aisles run north-south, numbered west to east. Aisle 1 is against the western wall. Aisle 30 is against the eastern wall. Each aisle is roughly 12 feet wide, with steel shelving units that go up 5 levels at about 30 feet to the ceiling. The lighting is industrial fluorescent, the kind that takes a full minute to reach full brightness, and gives everything a faintly green tint, like the whole building exists at the bottom of a river. Aisle 14 is almost exactly in the center of the building. It's flanked by 13 and 15, and from the south entrance, it looks identical to every other aisle. Same shelving, same concrete floor, same bin labels. During the day shift, it functions normally. Day crew stocks it, picks from it, runs inventory. I confirmed this with a day shift guy named Phil who smoked outside when I was arriving and he was leaving. He said aisle 14 was just an aisle. He said it like I'd asked if water was wet. He didn't work overnight. He didn't know. The difference starts at 12:40 a.m. I heard it first on my 4th night. I was in aisle 9 scanning bins of PVC pipe fittings when the quality of the silence changed. You know how a room sounds different when a refrigerator compressor kicks off? Not louder or quieter, but like the air itself changes density? It was like that, except the thing that stopped wasn't mechanical. The lights in aisle 14 had gone out. I couldn't see it from where I was, but I could feel the absence, like a tooth pulled from the middle of a smile. Then, about 20 minutes later, I heard the stacking. It's the only word for it. The sound of heavy, flat objects being placed on top of each other with great care. A dull, dense, regular percussion. Not fast, not slow. The rhythm of someone who has done this work 1,000 times and will do it 1,000 more. It went on for about 12 minutes, then stopped. I kept scanning. My hands were steady. I followed the rules. On my 6th night, I heard the voice. Rule 3 said conversational speech, indistinct. And that's accurate, but insufficient. It was 2 voices, I think, maybe 3. They had the cadence of people solving a problem together. Short exchanges, pauses for thought, the occasional longer statement. I couldn't make out words. The pitch was mid-range. It could have been men or women. It sounded like co-workers. It sounded like us. I mentioned this to Terry during break, and she shook her head before I finished the sentence. Don't describe it, she said. Rule 6 says don't describe what you see, but the same idea applies to what you hear. You start comparing notes. You start building a picture. You build a picture. You start wanting to look. That's how it works. What works? She pinched the bridge of her nose. The wanting, she said. It builds from details. Every detail you collect is a brick. Enough bricks and you've built a door. And then you walk through it. 3 weeks in, I started to feel it. Rule 8. The urge. It didn't arrive the way I expected. I thought it would be dramatic. A compulsion, a voice in my head, a magnetic pull. It wasn't. It was closer to remembering something you forgot to do. That low-grade cognitive itch, like you left the stove on. I'd be scanning in aisle 4, and some back corner of my brain would think, I should check on 14, not go into it, just check on it, walk past, glance down the aisle, confirm it was dark, confirm it was empty, and move on. It felt so reasonable. It felt like professionalism. I sat down, hands on the floor, counted to 60. The concrete was ice cold and gritty under my palms. By 30, the urge had faded. By 60, I felt like an idiot, like I'd just performed a ritual for a problem that didn't exist. That feeling, the embarrassment, the self-doubt, that was almost worse than the urge itself, because it made me less likely to do it again. It made me want to just push through next time, be tough, handle it. I mentioned this to Marcus during a check-in. He was quiet for a long time. The procedure feels stupid on purpose, he said finally, sitting on the floor counting out loud. It's humiliating. Nobody wants to do it twice. That's the design. Not Braddock's design, and it's designed by whatever is in 14. The rules fight it, but the embarrassment of following the rules is part of how it fights back. You follow? I followed. The people who wrote these rules, I said. Who are they? Marcus checked his watch. 3:08, he said. I need to prep the manifest. Stay in your section. I stayed. At 3:15, I heard him walk toward the center of the building. I heard his footsteps stop. A long silence, the dry whisper of paper on concrete, then a single knock on steel, and the sound of his boots retreating. My 5th week, Kyle went in. I need to tell this part carefully because I was not a witness to all of it, and I don't want to fill gaps with guesses. What I know because I was there for some of it, and because Terry told me the rest afterward, in a conversation we had in the parking lot at 5:30 a.m., while she smoked a cigarette with hands that would not stop shaking. It was a Tuesday. February 25th. Temperature outside was 14 degrees. Kyle had been quieter than usual. He'd come in late, not drastically, maybe 10 minutes. And Marcus had said something to him in the hallway that I didn't hear. Kyle's response was loud enough to hear. I'm fine, man, I'm here. What else do you want? Around 1:30 a.m., I was in aisle 3. Kyle's section started at aisle 15, one aisle over from 14. We were supposed to stay in our assigned sections, but the building is big enough that you sometimes end up passing through transition zones between sections. Kyle was somewhere in 15 or 16. I could hear his scanner beeping intermittently. At 1:47, I know the time because I checked my phone after the beeping stopped. The warehouse is never truly silent. There's always the HVAC, the hum of the electrical system, the occasional settling creak of a building that's been standing for 80+ years. But Kyle's scanner stopped, and in the pocket of quiet that followed, I heard him say something. One word, spoken softly, almost conversationally. I think it was a name. I think he said Dad. Kyle's father had died in a workplace accident at a foundry in Coshington when Kyle was 12. I learned this later. I didn't know it then. I just heard the word, and I heard the gentle, wondering tone of it, and the hair on my arm stood up so hard it hurt. I radioed Marcus. I think Kyle's going toward 14. Marcus came back instantly. No hesitation. Where are you? Aisle 3. Stay there. Terry position? Terry's voice calm and clipped. Aisle 11. Terry, hold at 13 South entrance. Do not enter. Danielle, break room, now. Should I? Break room, now. I went to the break room. I sat in the plastic chair next to the vending machine that sold off-brand honey buns for $1.25. I sat there and I listened to the radio, and I heard nothing for 19 minutes. The clock on the microwave said 2:06 when Marcus's voice came back. Kyle is in the break room annex. He's responsive. Terry, stand down. Danielle, stay put. I'm bringing him in. Marcus brought Kyle in through the east hallway. Kyle was walking on his own. His eyes were open. He was shivering. but it was warm in the break room. The space heater Terry kept under the table was always running. He sat down across from me and put his hands flat on the table, and I looked at his hands and I saw that his fingernails were dark. Not dirty. Dark, like the nail beds had been bruised from the inside. And his scanner was gone. He'd been holding it when he went into his section. He was not holding it now. "Where's your scanner?" I said, and Marcus cut in before Kyle could answer. "We'll get him a new one." Kyle looked at me. His eyes were wet and very wide, and his pupils were different sizes. He said, "She's still working in there. Did you know that? She's still doing inventory. She never stopped." "Who?" I said. "Don't," Marcus said, and his voice was the hardest I'd ever heard it, not angry. Final. Kyle didn't come back after that night. Marcus told me he'd taken a position at a distribution center in Newark. Better commute, that's what Marcus said. I looked Kyle up on social media 3 weeks later. His last post was from February 24th, the day before. Nothing after. His profile is still up. Sometimes I check. The copperhead tattoo stares out from his profile photo with flat, patient eyes, and there are no new posts. I should have quit. I need you to understand that I know this. I knew it then. But $17.80 an hour plus the differential and my knee and my debt, and the fact that the other jobs in Muskingum County paid less and required more of the body I was already struggling to maintain. I did the math, and the math said stay. The math has always been the thing that keeps people in places they shouldn't be. Not courage, not curiosity, not some dark fascination. Money. The need for money. If you've never made a decision like that, I don't know how to explain it to you. And if you have, I don't need to. I stayed. And because I stayed, I was there on March 11th when the manifest was wrong. The nightly manifest is generated by Braddock's central system and printed by Marcus at the start of each shift. It lists every item that needs to be scanned, verified, or cycle counted that night, organized by aisle. Normally, aisle 14 items appear maybe once or twice a week, and per Rule 1, we yellow tag them and leave them for day shift. Simple. On March 11th, 73 line items were assigned to aisle 14. Marcus stared at the printout for a long time. He took his glasses off, cleaned them, put them back on, took them off again. Terry looked over his shoulder and said a word I will not repeat, but which began with, "Holy." "That's not possible," Marcus said. "The system caps overnight aisle 14 lines at 15. I set that parameter myself." "So someone changed it," Terry said. "Nobody has access to change it except me and District." "Then call District." Marcus laughed. It was not a humorous sound. "District doesn't know about the supplemental protocol. District doesn't know about any of this. As far as Braddock Corporate is concerned, aisle 14 is a standard inventory aisle with a lighting issue they've been meaning to fix for 4 years. I looked at the line items. They were normal products. Bins of reflective road markers, cases of safety cones, pallets of road salt. All standard Braddock inventory. The bin locations were all in the 14 series, and at the bottom of the list, there was a line item I'd never seen before. Bin 14-N-00, personnel equipment. Verify present. Do not remove. "What's bin 14-N-00? I asked. Marcus and Terry looked at each other. A conversation happened in that look. The kind of conversation that takes a decade of shared experience to conduct in silence. Then Terry said, "That bin doesn't exist. It's on the manifest." "It doesn't exist," she said again. "There is no N level in any aisle. The shelving goes A through E, bottom to top. N is not a real location." "Then why is the system generating it?" Marcus folded the manifest and put it in his back pocket. "We're yellow tagging all 73 lines," he said. Everyone. And I'm calling district in the morning to get the parameter reset. And the N bin? I said. Doesn't exist, he said. Can't verify something that doesn't exist. Forget you read it. I didn't forget. You know I didn't forget. That's not how this works. Not for people like me, people who solve problems by understanding them, people who learned in school that knowledge is the way out. I didn't forget because forgetting felt like giving up. And giving up was the thing I'd been refusing to do since I was 17, and the doctor told me my knee would never be right again, and I should adjust my expectations. I have been adjusting my expectations my entire life. I was not going to adjust them for a warehouse. That was my mistake. Not curiosity, not bravery, stubbornness. The same stubbornness that finished my degree, that worked through the pain, that drove to this job every night in a car with a heater that worked only on the driver's side. The quality that had kept me alive was now the thing putting me in danger, and I couldn't tell the difference because they felt identical. I started watching the day shift. Not officially. I'd just come in 30 minutes early, sit in my car, and watch the building through the windshield. I saw Phil and the day crew arrive, saw them enter, saw the lights on inside through the high windows. I saw people walk into aisle 14 during the day like it was nothing, because during the day, it was nothing. I saw them carry inventory in and push carts out. The aisle functioned. It was real. It held real products on real shelves under real lights. But I noticed something on the fourth day of watching. The day crew that entered aisle 14 always entered from the south end. Always. They came in from the front of the building and walked north into the aisle. I never once saw anyone enter from the north. The north end of aisle 14, the end with the sealed kiln vents, had no approach path from the day crew's usual routes. Their workflow just didn't take them there. And because I'd been inside the building at night, I knew something about the north end that the day crew probably didn't think about. The shelving up there was different, older. The bins weren't the same blue plastic as the rest of the warehouse. They were metal, painted gray, and they had labels that weren't printed by Braddock's system. They were handwritten, faded, some of them in a script I didn't recognize as English. I confirmed this on a night when I was assigned aisle 13. Standing at my own shelving unit, I could see through the gaps in the racking to the adjacent aisle. Aisle 14. The south end looked normal. Blue bins, Braddock labels, standard stock. But as my eyes traveled north, the transition was clear. About 2/3 of the way down, the bins changed. The shelving changed. The floor changed, from smooth poured concrete to something rougher, older, with that drainage channel running down the center like a spine. The north end of aisle 14 was not the same building. I don't mean that metaphorically. On March 18th, I found the binder. It was in the break room, in a filing cabinet that I'd assumed was locked because the top drawer didn't open. The bottom drawer did. Inside was a 3-ring binder, black, unlabeled, with a cracked spine and pages that had yellowed to the color of old teeth. It wasn't hidden, exactly. It was just in a place where you wouldn't look unless you were looking. The binder contained shift logs going back to 2004. Not the official Braddock logs. Those were digital. These were handwritten in a rotation of different hands, and they recorded things the official system would never capture. Each entry followed a loose format: date, shift personnel, notable events, and a section at the bottom labeled 14 status. I sat on the break room floor and read for 2 hours. Here is what I learned. The overnight protocol for aisle 14 has existed in some form since at least 1997. But the binder only started in 2004 when a shift lead named Rosa Dominguez formalized the record keeping. Before that, the rules were apparently oral, passed from shift lead to shift lead like a folk tradition. The building was a ceramics plant during World War II. It produced insulators for military radio equipment and, after the war, transitioned to commercial pottery production before closing in 1971. It sat empty for 16 years. In 1987, a company called Lakeshore Storage converted it to a warehousing facility. Braddock Logistics acquired it in 2001. During the Lakeshore era, 3 overnight workers disappeared. Not quit. Disappeared. The log entries referencing this were secondhand. Rosa had reconstructed the history from conversations with a retired Lakeshore employee named Harlan Beale, who she described as the one who wrote the first rules. Harlan told Rosa that the first disappearance was in 1989. A man named Victor Toth was doing a solo overnight stock check. He was found the next morning by the day crew. Or rather, his clipboard was found. It was on the floor in aisle 14, near the north end. Victor was not with it. He was never found. His car was still in the lot. The second disappearance was in 1991. A woman named Carla Espinoza. Same circumstances. Overnight. Alone. Clipboard found. Person gone. The third was in 1993. A man named Dale Whitfield. But Dale was different. Dale wasn't found gone. Dale was found still there, sitting on the floor at the north end of aisle 14, alive, breathing, eyes open. He couldn't speak. He couldn't stand. He was holding an inventory scanner that wasn't powered on, moving it over empty air like he was scanning bins that no one else could see. He was taken to the hospital in Zanesville and later transferred to a facility in Columbus. Rosa's notes said Harlan visited him once, in 1998. Dale was still making the scanning motion with his right hand. His left hand was holding something that wasn't there. He told Harlan, in the only coherent sentence he produced in the visit, "I'm almost done with the north end. Tell them I'm almost done." Harlan wrote the first rules after Dale. They were simpler then. Stay out at night. Don't go alone. Don't listen. The rules grew over the years as new behaviors were observed. The lights going out, the sounds, the figure at the north end, the liquid in the drainage channel. Each rule was a response to a specific incident. They were not theoretical precautions. They were scar tissue. The binder also recorded what happened at 3:15 a.m. The manifest. This part was harder to piece together because the log entries were more guarded. Shorter, less descriptive, as though the writers were reluctant to put certain things in writing. But the pattern was clear. Every night at 3:15, the shift lead placed a manifest page inside aisle 14. This had started under Harlan. Rosa continued it. Every shift lead since had continued it. The manifest was a list of items. Real items, from real Braddock inventory. Printed on Braddock letterhead, and formatted to look exactly like a standard pick list. But the items on it were chosen according to a specific principle that Rosa described in a single cryptic line. It wants to work. Give it work. Enough work to fill the hours. Not so much it finishes early. The manifest wasn't a containment device. It wasn't a ward or a spell or a ritual of protection. It was a task. A job assignment. Whatever was in aisle 14 at night was being managed the way you'd manage an employee. By keeping it busy. By giving it a shift. The rules existed to keep the living workers out of its section while it worked, and the manifest existed to keep it focused on its section so it wouldn't wander into theirs. I closed the binder. My hands were cold. The break room felt very small. The thing in aisle 14 wasn't a monster. It wasn't a ghost, exactly. It was a worker. It was still on the clock. I should tell you about the liquid. I promised myself I wouldn't, but I owe you the full picture. On March 22nd, Terry and I were both in our sections. Her in 12, me in 5. when she radioed me on the channel we weren't supposed to use for non-emergency communication. Danielle, come to 13 South. Walk, don't run. Keep your eyes on the floor. I walked. It took me 4 minutes. When I reached aisle 13, Terry was standing at the south entrance, looking down. Not into 14, into 13, at the floor. The drainage channel that ran under aisle 14 had a branch. A capillary, if you want to think of it that way. It was new. Not in the sense that someone had built it, but in the sense that it hadn't been there before. A thin crack in the concrete floor of aisle 13, running east-west, connecting to the main channel in 14. And inside this crack, liquid, dark, not black, dark red-brown, the color of old rust or dried blood reconstituted. It moved slowly with a viscosity between water and oil, and it moved against the gradient. The floor in 13 was flat. There was no slope. The liquid was moving uphill, west to east, toward 14, being pulled back. But it had been here, in 13, outside the aisle. Terry said, "It's spreading. The channel's growing." Has this happened before? Twice that I know of. Rosa's log mentions it once in 2007. Marcus saw it in 2021. Both times it receded on its own by morning. What do? We radio Marcus and we go to the break room and we wait. We just leave it? We don't touch it. We don't study it. We don't think about it more than we have to. She looked at me. Her face was lined and drawn, and her eyes were absolutely steady. Danielle, listen to me. I know you. I've known you 5 weeks and I know you. You are the type of person who believes understanding something gives you power over it. In here, understanding something gives it power over you. Every question you ask is an invitation. Every answer you find is a door opening in the wrong direction. Stop. Looking. I heard her. I understood her. I believed her. And I went back to the binder that same night after she left and read the rest of it. Because Terry was right about who I am, and being right didn't change who I am. Nothing was going to change who I am. That was the whole problem. The last 40 pages of the binder were different. They weren't shift logs. They were Rosa Dominguez's personal notes, written in a tighter, more urgent hand, dated from late 2009 to early 2011. Rosa had done what I was doing. She had asked questions. She had investigated. And she had found something I hadn't found yet. The ceramics plant had not just made insulators during the war. It had also run a night shift. A second production line that wasn't in the official records. Rosa had found this out from property records at the Muskingum County Courthouse, where a 1946 inspection report referenced remediation of kiln area following cessation of experimental production. The experimental production wasn't ceramics. The plant had been contracted by the War Department to produce components for incendiary devices. Not bombs exactly, but delivery mechanisms. Ceramic housings that could withstand extreme heat. The work was done at night, by a crew that was kept separate from the day shift. The night crew didn't know what the day crew made, and the day crew didn't know what the night crew made. Compartmentalization. Standard wartime practice. In November 1944, there was an accident. Rosa couldn't find details. The inspection report referenced it only as the incident of November 9th, 44. But the night shift was suspended afterward, and the kiln area on the north end was sealed, not decommissioned, sealed. There's a difference. Decommissioning means you take things apart. Sealing means you close them up with everything still inside. Rosa believed that whatever happened on November 9th, 1944, killed the night crew. And she believed that the night crew never stopped working, not because they were ghosts in the traditional sense, not because they were replaying their deaths or haunting the site of their trauma, because they didn't know they were dead, because the work was compartmentalized, because the night shift never saw the day shift, and the day shift never saw the night shift. And the night crew had no external reference point to tell them that the war was over, that the work was done, that they could stop. They were still producing, still running inventory on materials that no longer existed for a war that ended 81 years ago. The sounds we heard, the stacking, the voices, the mechanical rhythm, were production sounds, warehouse sounds, the sounds of people doing their jobs. And the manifest Marcus placed at 3:15 every morning was their work order, their assignment for the night, given to them so they would stay in their section, stay focused, stay contained within the aisle that corresponded to their original workspace. Because without a task, they wandered. Without a job to do, they went looking for one. And when they went looking, they found the living workers, and they tried to integrate them into the shift. That's what happened to Victor, to Carla, to Dale. They were absorbed into a shift that doesn't end, assigned to a production line that has no output, no supervisor, no clock out. An eternal night shift in a sealed room, doing work that serves nothing, for a war that's been over since before most of us were born. And Kyle heard his father's voice, and the voice said something like, "Come help me finish this." And Kyle went, because that's what you do when your dad asks you to come help. Marcus got him out. But Marcus told me later, quietly, in the parking lot, on a night when it was too cold to stand outside, and we stood outside anyway. Marcus told me that when he reached Kyle was standing in the dark at the north end of aisle 14, and he was not alone. Marcus could hear the others around Kyle in the dark. Not see them, hear them, the sound of people working. And they had made room for Kyle. They had cleared a space for him in the line. They were welcoming him, not with malice, with the simple, tired, automatic hospitality of co-workers making room for the new person. "Here, stand here. This is what we do. You'll learn fast." Marcus said the worst part was that Kyle didn't want to leave. Marcus had to physically pull him out, and Kyle was crying, and he kept saying, "They need me. They're short-staffed. They need me." I carried all of this knowledge through the last weeks of March. It was heavy, not metaphorically. I mean, I felt it in my body. My shoulders ached. My jaw was clenched so often that I cracked a molar and had to pay $200 I didn't have for an emergency dental visit. I was sleeping 3 hours a day and dreaming about inventory. In the dreams, I was scanning bins that went on forever, and every bin I scanned revealed another bin behind it, and every barcode resolved to the same number, 14-N-00. The bin that didn't exist. Personnel equipment. Verify present. Do not remove. I knew what was in that bin. I knew before I admitted it to myself. Personnel equipment in a warehouse context means the gear assigned to a worker, their scanner, their vest, their badge. Bin 14-N-00 was where the night crew's equipment was stored. The equipment they were still using. Verify present meant confirm it was still there. Do not remove meant don't take it out of the aisle. And the system had generated it on the manifest. The Braddock system, the corporate, digital, modern system, had generated a line item for a bin that existed only in the sealed 1944 section of the building, which meant the two systems were touching, the old shift and the new inventory. They were merging. The night crew wasn't just working in their section anymore. They were logging into ours. The 73 line items on March 11th weren't a glitch. They were a staffing request. The night crew was expanding their shift, and they were requisitioning inventory to fill it. They were growing. They needed more work, more material, more people. The manifest Marcus placed each night. The task designed to keep them contained was no longer enough. They were finishing early. Rosa's rule, enough work to fill the hours, Not so much it finishes early. They were finishing early now, on April 1st. And I swear to you, this has nothing to do with the date. The universe is not that cute. I came in and Marcus was sitting in the break room with the lights off. Not in the dark. The vending machine threw enough glow to see by, but the overhead fluorescents were off, and Marcus was sitting in the half-light with the binder open in front of him. "You read it," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "All of Rosa's notes?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "I was hoping you wouldn't. I was also hoping you would. I've been doing this alone since the last shift lead quit in 2023. Terry knows the rules, but she doesn't want to know why. She's right not to want to know. But I need someone who knows why, because the situation is changing and I can't figure out the next step alone." He told me about the manifest, how he generated it each night using a formula Rosa had developed. A specific number of line items calculated based on the time between 12:40 and 4:50 a.m., divided by an estimated task completion rate per item, with a buffer of 30 minutes. The formula assumed a crew of approximately 12 workers operating at human pace. For years, this had been sufficient. The night crew worked their manifest, stayed in their section, and the living workers stayed in theirs. But the completion rate was accelerating. Marcus had been tracking it through indirect evidence. The sound stopping earlier each night. The 4:50 a.m. lights coming back on with the aisle looking more finished than the manifest should allow. In January, the crew was finishing with about 45 minutes to spare. In February, an hour. Now, in late March, they were finishing by 3 a.m. before Marcus even delivered the manifest. "They're not waiting for the assignment anymore," he said. "They're generating their own work. They're pulling from the system directly. That's what the 73 line items were. That wasn't a glitch. That was them placing an order. What happens when they run out of work entirely?" Marcus cleaned his glasses, put them on, took them off, put them back on. "In 2007, there was a night when Rosa miscalculated the manifest. She was sick, flu, and she cut the line items too short. The crew finished by 2 a.m. Rosa wrote about it in the binder. They came out of the aisle. Not physically, not in a way you could see. But every light in the building started flickering in sequence, north to south like a wave. Every scanner on the floor activated simultaneously and started logging phantom counts. And 2 of Rosa's team members reported feeling hands on their shoulders, guiding them, positioning them, like someone was showing them where to stand on a production line. What did Rosa do? She generated an emergency manifest, hand-wrote it, ran to aisle 14 and put it on the floor. The activity stopped within 10 minutes. "So we just make bigger manifests." Marcus shook his head. "You're not hearing me. The rate is accelerating. Last month, they needed 60 items to stay busy. This month, they need 100, and they're still finishing early. Next month, it'll be 200. The month after, the whole warehouse. Eventually, there won't be enough work in this building to keep them occupied. And when that happens, they'll go looking for more. They'll expand the shift." "Expand it where?" "Wherever there's work to be done, wherever there are workers to join. This building is connected to Braddock's entire regional network through the inventory system. Every warehouse, every distribution center, every loading dock with a scanner and a manifest." He let that settle. I let it settle. "They're not malicious," he said. "They don't want to hurt anyone. They want to work. They're the most dedicated crew you'll ever not see. But they don't know they're dead, and they don't know the war is over, and they don't know that pulling living people into their shift kills them. They think they're helping. They think they're training the new hires." I went home that morning and didn't sleep. I sat on my apartment floor, a studio above a closed barbershop on Main Street in Byesville, and I thought about Dale Whitfield in his hospital room, scanning invisible bins with an empty hand, saying I'm almost done with the north end. I thought about Kyle saying they need me, they're short-staffed. I thought about my mother on the Kraft Heinz line, doing the same motions 8 hours a day for 20 years, and how the only difference between her and the night crew was that she got to go home. I thought about the specific horror of a workforce that cannot stop. Not because a monster compels them, not because a curse binds them, because the work is all they knew, and no one ever told them it was finished, and the structure that was supposed to tell them. The end of the shift, the walk to the parking lot, the drive home, was sealed behind concrete and steel in 1944 and never reopened. They were still in the building because the building was still their workplace, and they were still on the clock because no one had ever clocked them out. And I thought about me, about how I had come to this warehouse because I had no other options, about how $17.80 an hour with a differential was the chain that bound me here, and how the difference between being trapped by economics and being trapped by death was a difference of degree, not of kind. I wasn't the night crew, but I wasn't free either. None of us were. We were all working shifts we couldn't leave, in buildings that didn't care about us, for systems that would never tell us we'd done enough. That's the thing about this story that I can't make fit into a neat shape. The horror isn't the supernatural element. The horror is that the supernatural element is just work. It's just the job continuing forever, and the workers continuing with it, and the system continuing to demand more, and the living workers. Me, Marcus, Terry. Our job is to manage the dead workers the same way management has always managed workers, by giving them just enough to keep them busy and hoping they don't figure out they're being contained. We are middle management for ghosts. We are shift leads for the dead, and the dead are organizing. April 4th, last night, the night before I decided to write this. I came in at 10:45. The parking lot had 6 cars in it, which was wrong. There should have been 4. Marcus, Terry, me, and the new kid. A 22-year-old named Amber, who had started 2 weeks ago and who I had not yet told about the binder. The extra cars were a white Braddock corporate sedan and a gray Chevy Malibu with a Columbus plate frame. Inside, Marcus was in the break room with 2 people I'd never seen. A man in a Braddock polo and khakis. District, obviously. And a woman in a dark blazer carrying a laptop bag. The woman was maybe 50, with short silver hair and the kind of face that was made for delivering news you didn't want to hear. Danielle, Marcus said. His voice was strange, flat. This is Grant Yoder from District and Dr. Lena Vasic from Corporate Risk Assessment. We're doing a facility audit, Yoder said. He smiled like he'd practiced it. Nothing to worry about. Routine. Dr. Vasic did not smile. She was looking at me the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. Miss Harker, I understand you've been on the overnight shift for approximately 8 weeks. Yes. And you've reviewed all standard safety documentation? Yes. Including any supplemental documentation maintained locally? The room got very quiet. Marcus was looking at the table. Terry in the doorway was looking at me. I've reviewed the clipboard, I said carefully. Just the clipboard? Just the clipboard. Dr. Vasic opened her laptop. We've been monitoring some anomalies in the inventory system originating from this facility, specifically phantom scan events occurring during overnight hours. Items being logged as counted, verified, and in some cases relocated, with no corresponding user ID attached to the transaction. The system is registering workforce activity that doesn't match your staffing numbers. Equipment malfunction, Marcus said. He said it quickly. Too quickly. The phantom scans follow a consistent pattern, Vasic continued, as if Marcus hadn't spoken. They occur between approximately 12:40 a.m. and 3 a.m., They're concentrated in the aisle 14 section, but have been expanding to adjacent aisles over the past 6 weeks. And they've increased in volume by roughly 300% since January. She turned the laptop toward us. On the screen was a graph. The x-axis was dates. The y-axis was scan events. The line was exponential. At the current rate of increase, the phantom activity will exceed your actual overnight output within 2 weeks. At that point, the system will begin treating the phantom data as authoritative, and your real inventory counts will be flagged as anomalous. Effectively, the system will think you're the error. I felt something in my chest go cold. Not fear, recognition. The night crew was becoming the real shift. The system was going to recognize them. Their work, their counts, their version of reality, as legitimate, and us as the malfunction. We were going to be the ones who didn't belong. "What are you recommending?" Marcus asked. Yoder cleared his throat. "Corporate is considering a full system reset for this facility. Wipe the overnight scan data, recalibrate the inventory baselines, and transition to automated counting during off hours. Robotic inventory, no more overnight crew." "You can't do that," Marcus said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "You don't understand what the overnight crew does here." "You count inventory," Yoder said. "Robots can do that. We don't just count, we manage." Marcus stopped himself. He looked at me. He looked at Terry. He looked at Dr. Vasic, who was watching him with those X-ray eyes. He couldn't say it. "How do you tell corporate that your real job is to babysit a ghost shift by giving them enough makework to prevent them from consuming the living? How do you put that in a quarterly report?" "The overnight crew is essential," I said. "The human presence is essential. If you automate and remove the living workers, the system anomalies won't stop. They'll accelerate. Because the anomalies aren't a malfunction. I stopped too. Same wall. Dr. Vasic closed her laptop. "The decision is above my assessment grade," she said. "I'll be recommending further observation before any structural changes. But I want to be clear. The pattern in this building is not unique. We've identified similar anomalies at 7 other Braddock facilities, all in buildings constructed before 1960. All concentrated during overnight hours." She paused. "Whatever is happening here is not staying here. They left at midnight. Their taillights disappeared down the access road and the building settled back into itself. Marcus, Terry, Amber, and me. 4 living people in 300,000 square feet of steel and concrete and history." At 12:40, the lights in aisle 14 went out. At 12:42, the sounds began. Stacking, voices, the rhythm of work. At 12:55, my scanner beeped. A notification I'd never seen before. New personnel logged. Overnight shift, aisle 14. Welcome. It wasn't for me. It was a system-generated onboarding message, the kind that fires when a new employee badges in for their first shift. But no one had badged in. No one new was here. The night crew had just hired someone. I looked at Marcus. He was already looking at me. He was already pulling out the manifest. The thick one he'd started preparing, the one with 200 line items designed to keep them occupied through morning. "It's not going to be enough," I said. "I know," he said. "What do we do?" He put his glasses on, took them off, cleaned them, put them back on. Then he did something I'd never seen him do. He sat down on the floor, right there in the main corridor, and put both hands flat on the concrete. And he started counting. 1, 2, 3. Terry sat down next to him. 4, 5, 6. I sat down. 7, 8, 9. We counted to 60, all of us. On the floor of that warehouse in the middle of the night, in the middle of Ohio, in the middle of a country full of people working jobs that are eating them alive. We followed Rule 8. Not because we felt the urge to enter aisle 14, but because we felt the urge to give up, to stop fighting, to let the system run itself, and to stop pretending that 4 living people on a warehouse floor could hold back a workforce that was growing every night and would never, ever stop. The urge passed. We got up. We went back to work. Amber looked at us from the end of the corridor, confused and a little frightened, and Terry put a hand on her shoulder and said, "Come on, honey, I'll explain what I can. The rest, you'll learn." I'm writing this from my apartment. It's 2 p.m. on April 5th. I should be sleeping. I have to be back at the warehouse in 8.5 hours. Marcus called this morning. District approved the automated inventory pilot. They're installing the first robotic scanners next month. The overnight crew will be reduced to 2 people. A monitoring presence. By June. By September, if the pilot is successful, the overnight human crew will be eliminated entirely. They're going to leave the night crew alone in the building. No manifest, no task, no one to manage them, no one to give them work, no one to keep them in their aisle. And the system is already starting to recognize them. 7 other Braddock facilities. Buildings constructed before 1960. Overnight anomalies. The night crews of America's industrial past, still on the clock, still working, still growing, connected now through the same digital infrastructure that connects everything. A network of ghost shifts linked by inventory software, expanding through server architecture that was never designed to contain the dead, but is perfectly designed to employ them. I don't know what happens when they run out of work. I don't know what happens when the manifests stop and the living workers leave, and the robots scan silently through the night, and the dead stand idle in their aisles with nothing to do and nowhere to go. I don't know if they'll stay in the buildings, or if they'll follow the network out into other warehouses, other distribution centers, other workplaces where the lights go off and the overnight shift begins and no one is watching. I know that I'll be there tonight. I know Marcus will be there, Terry, Amber, 4 people who can't afford to quit, holding the line with clipboards and manifests, and a rule sheet with a bullet hole through it, buying time for a system that has already decided we're the error. If you work an overnight shift, in a warehouse, a hospital, a factory, a store, and you hear sounds in the closed section after midnight, I want you to consider the possibility that you're not alone. Not because something is hunting you, because something is working next to you the way it always has, the way it always will, long after the living have been replaced and the buildings have been automated and the last human worker has clocked out for the last time. The night shift doesn't end, it just stops being visible. And somewhere in aisle 14, they're almost done with the north end. They've been almost done for 81 years. And they are so tired. And they will never stop, because no one ever told them they could.